Hi guys, welcome to the Higher Points, and today we're coming at you with a to the point. Just me and Nick in here, and we're gonna just throw some ideas at you, what we've been thinking about the last week, and just some little talking points of just things that have been running through our minds, and maybe it'll help you, maybe it won't. I don't know. We hope it does.
One hell of an intro there.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to help you. It probably will. Maybe it will. I don't know. Maybe it won't. So.
If it doesn't, get over yourself.
All right, Nate. What you got on your notes?
My notes? Nothing. We're blank.
So the thing that's been, for me that I wanted to talk about today. So I saw this on a gentleman's story that I follow on Instagram, and I follow Daily Stoic. I think you do too, because I see you share. I don't know if you just share off me or if you follow the page.
I follow it.
And so the Stoics are Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Socrates, Seneca, all of those kind of guys that lived back and spent a lot of time in thought because they didn't have phones and TV and stuff, and we'll get more to that here in a minute. But one of the things that he shared was, it was just it looks like it's from an app. It's almost like your daily Bible app, but the Stoic version. And it says, show the qualities you were made for. And this is a quote from Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 5:5. So people aren't in awe of your sharp mind, so be it. But you have many other qualities you can claim, or you can't claim to have been deprived of at birth. Display then those qualities in your own power, honesty, dignity, endurance, chastity, contentment, frugality, kindness, freedom, persistence, avoiding gossip, and magnanimity. Man, lots of words there that I haven't heard in a while. So, and then the explanation to that is below it. It says, it's easy to blame your own circumstances. One person curses that they weren't born taller, another that they're not smarter, with a different complexion, or born in a different country. It'd be hard to find a single person on this planet, from supermodels on down, who doesn't think they're deficient at least some way. But whatever your perceived deficits are, remember, there are positive qualities that you can develop and don't depend on genetic accidents. You have a choice to be truthful. You have a choice to be dignified. You can choose to endure. You can choose to be happy. You can choose to be chaste. You can choose to be thrifty. You can choose to be kind to others. You can choose to be free. You can persist under difficult odds. You can avoid trafficking and gossip. You can choose to be gracious. And honestly, aren't the traits that are the result of effort and skill more impressive anyway? So, that was one of the things. I think it's easy to get into these mindsets and play the comparison game and look at people like, I look at somebody like, say, you, right? Like, you obviously are skinnier than me. And, but you've worked at that, and you played football, and you had those natural knacks for football. Plus you were coached in football. And so that made things better. And, it's easy for me to want to compare, I could have been better at football. But the same thing can probably be said about you, of you, maybe you look at me and say I wish I were as good at computers as he is, or something like that.
Or shooting, or.
It's those things that I think it's easy to get into that cycle of comparison. And there really isn't much in this world I don't think you can't accomplish by just putting your mind to it. And I know we've talked about a lot of that mental resiliency and things like that.
No two paths are the same for whether that's a weight loss goal or career or relationship. And no two paths are the same. No two relationships are going to make sense to, my relationship may not make sense to you. Yours just may not make sense to me. It's.
Well, and I also, if you're listening to this podcast and you say, well, you don't know what I've been through. Well, let me tell you something. Everybody's been through something. Mm-hmm. And there are people that have multi-million-dollar companies that came from riches. There are people that have multi-million-dollar companies that came from nothing.
Yep.
There are people that, Ben Carson, he is a very successful man, surgeon, politician, came from abject poverty. Granted, he worked his way through that process. Now, this isn't me saying everybody always has those equal opportunities to everybody has equal opportunities, but you're not guaranteed equal outcomes. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it has to do and go back to obviously the parenting in the household and the parents trying to lift you out of that and make you better and all that other kind of stuff. But it's easy to get into the comparison game and want to say, I wish I had X, Y, or Z. when you can choose to do things a different way. You know, it used to be when I was first a new cop on the street, like I would take what other cops said about specific people as gospel. Like, you know, you constantly hear that guy's a doper, that guy's a piece of shit, you know, whatever, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. But then I get to meet them and I get to know them, and they're nothing like that at all. Like they weren't. They're just like normal, everyday, cool, chill people that sometimes make some bad choices.
Yeah, that one time that cop had that interaction, they could have been that way.
Yeah.
But, like, that doesn't define who they are 24/7.
Haven't we all made mistakes like that?
Yep.
And so another thing that I want to get out of this is those words that were read, or that I read to you from Marcus Aurelius, were, you know, brought up by his thoughts, like just him thinking. And there's a great book out there, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was written by a NASA scientist basically talking about boredom. And in that book, he basically talks about how some of the greatest ideas to overcome technological things that didn't exist back in the 60s, like things that we take for granted now, to solve some sort of problem on how to land them on the moon or to get a rocket into orbit. Technology didn't exist, and some of the best ideas that they ever came up with came up with out of boredom. And the reason that I say that that's important is not that necessarily Marcus Aurelius was always bored because, you know, he's very busy. He was a, you know, king or a Caesar, or I don't know what the right word is.
A Caesar, I think.
And, you know, and so, you know, we need to give our brains, it's easy for our brains to be entertained in our society today. It's easy to, like, I have nothing better to do. Yeah. And I'm going to load Netflix. I'm going to load Hulu. I'm going to YouTube. I'm going to swipe TikTok. I'm going to get on Snapchat. I'm going to get on Instagram, and so on and so on and so on. And, you know, they say you have to give your brain 3 full days to detox from technology to really get the full effect. And just keep in mind that your device is being used as a mind control device. You know, every time that it goes off, every time that you look at it, every time that, you know, you feel that notification or whatever, you're getting that little micro dose of dopamine. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with likes on Instagram and stuff. Like, so for me, like my Instagram, like I don't have it notify me anything at all. And that's the only, I think, social media app that I have on there. The only thing I have that gives me notifications is like weather and the Daily Bible app. And I'm looking to I actually asked that guy what that program was for the Stoic thing, because I want that as well. But you're giving yourself micro doses of dopamine, and then your device is being used to control you, because now you're having to seek that device to get that dopamine release to make your brain feel better. Now they can sell you more ad space, so on and so on and so on. Yeah. And so keep that in mind when you're wanting to give your 4 to 6-year-old child their own smartphone. You know, that is not the best idea for your child's overall mental well-being in the long term.
No, it's not.
So allow yourself to just be like bored. You can come up with some of the greatest ideas that you'd never considered or never would have thought of had you not allowed yourself just the opportunity for your brain to do what it does. Because the way your brain works and the memory is you have like abstract thought, where like it looks like literally like abstract paintings and art, where you're trying to make sense of things and make sense of your world, and then your body or your brain eventually picks it apart and puts it together like puzzle pieces to make it into something that is tangible, something that's, you know, your brain understands. Mm-hmm. And that's how you come up with those ideas. And not just NASA scientists, but hell, like how are you trying to overcome an issue with your kid? Yeah. Like they're not listening to you, or a problem employee.
Well, I mean, it kind of ties into, like, last week you talked about the meditation, or was it the week before? You talked about the meditation and everything, and you talked about it with Janine a little bit, and, you know, like, that's something I've been really trying to focus on, not necessarily meditating, but even just praying, you know, like, I've been going through it recently, and just trying to get away from my phone and focus on, like, what emotions I'm really feeling, you know, and I've been reading or listening to Ed Milet's book. And chapter 5 talks about, like, emotions and really, like, meditating on those and figuring out, like, those 3 to 4 emotions that you want to feel and focusing on those and then pushing out the ones that are negative, you know. I've had a lot of anxiety recently for certain reasons. And just really focusing on that and, like, praying on it, but also, like, I don't need this in my life. Like, I can't control this. It's out of my control. You know, pushing that to the side and then just trying to focus on emotions that are going to be more positive, you know. And, like, anxiety is not all bad. a certain level of anxiety is good. You know, it keeps you in check. It keeps you like, oh, I need to get this stuff done, you know. Otherwise, you're just going to keep procrastinating. But it gets to a certain point, and it's crippling. You know?
Well, that's the whole, what you just got done talking about is basically the idea behind the whole Stoic mindset in general, no matter what Stoic you read, is essentially the litmus test is, can I control this? Yes. Okay, I'll put my brain power to it. Can I control this? No. Okay, I'm not putting my brain power to it. So, like, for instance, can I control that, you know, I was born tall and not short? Like, can I control that? Can I fix that? Is that something I can, like, I mean, I guess I could go get my legs chopped off and sewn back together and go through therapy and be shorter. But I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, can you control it? Yes. Spend your brain power on it. No, don't spend your brain power on it.
Yep.
Because
there's a lot more things that are in the present that need your attention than that thing that you can't control.
Well, and you know, looking at it also from the parenting aspect, like, can I constantly control my children and what the decisions that they make? No. And I just have to let them sometimes experience and get the natural consequences of the world. Speaking of books, the book that Nate was talking about was Ed Milet's book, The Power of One More. You're welcome, by the way. And the book that I want to talk about is Parenting with wow. It's like parenting with love and logic. And in that book, it talks a lot about allowing your kids to just experience negative consequences that life pushes their way. Because, you know, it's like Eli right now, he's living through, I tried to tell him to save the last couple hood construction checks because he was getting ready to make half the money working half the hours. And because he'd never experienced not having extra money, then he was like, oh, I'm fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. I'm good. Right. And
bought himself some pit vipers.
Yeah. And blew the money. And at the time I was like, okay, you know, and I could have, I mean, I have access to his account. I could have taken the money from him, put it in an account and held it. Right. But what lesson does he learn there?
Nothing. He just gets pissed at you.
Yeah. He gets mad at me and I'm basically being controlling. He doesn't learn any lesson. And while, you know, and this is one of them things where it's not hurting him, right? Like he is not in danger. But right now he is feeling the effects of, after he pays his cell phone and insurance, there's really not a whole lot of money left over. So he is living that every day and he can't wait to get back to hood construction, start mowing again. Like he wants to do it now.
Yeah.
But you know, he is experiencing that. So sometimes just letting people experience it, and not just your kids, but like your spouse, your family members. Like you can't save everyone from themselves. You can control you though, and how you respond to those things.
Well, I mean, when you try to control those situations, a lot of times you'll end up like pushing yourself too far and too hard, and you'll lose yourself in that.
Or drive a wedge even between you and whomever it is that you may care about.
Yep.
And, you know, it's just one of those things of like, while I don't treat the readings of the Stoics like it's gospel, like I don't treat it like the Bible, but I think it has some like really great stuff in there. I mean, those guys,
I don't know, man. It's
were
just
the great
like
philosophers. I mean, phenomenal.
They
thought
post
processes
them daily on Instagram, you know, on that Daily Stoic.
Yeah.
And I don't know, they've just been speaking to me.
Yeah.
Just helping me get through a shitty time.
I mean, even in not a shitty time, they're good reminders of things, of like what to do, what not to do, and things to think about.
Yeah.
So one other thing that I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit is like, so Goldman Sachs, Jeff Bezos, all the big names in money. And I'm trying to decide where I stand on this. They keep saying we're getting ready to go into like a really terrible recession and those kind of things. And sometimes
we talked about that at that economic development deal last week in Sterling. That Wichita State business professor came in and talked, and he said out of like 4,000 economists, like professionals, it was like 98% agreed that we're about to go into recession. Which is, he's like, so we're going to go into recession, like by the numbers, but if you look at it, like we're still basically fully employed right now. You know, and those jobs aren't going to go away. And the slowdown is going to probably be good for our economy because we're so backed up on like supply chain issues, you know, so those are going to be able to catch up and we're going to be able to get what we need at the grocery stores, and we're going to be able to get what we need, like jars for us, and we'll be able, like at High Point Farms, and fertilizers and that kind of stuff. Like, people are going to be able to slowly catch up on that instead of it just go, 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 go. And like lumber and stuff, you know, like that's going to slow down. We're not going to be building new houses. We're going to be doing remodels and stuff. So lumber's not going to be as needed. It's still going to be needed. And so I think it, and he was talking like, yes, we're going to have a recession, but also it could be good for our economy. And it's because the Fed's pushing us to that.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, I wholly distrust our media and government as a whole. Mm-hmm. So when I hear that stuff, I'm like, okay, is this misinformation, disinformation? Are you trying to control me? So that's the litmus test that I look at that through. So for me, the verdict is still out on that. You know, and of course, I'm not an economist and I don't claim to be one. But one thing I can say that I've done a fair amount of research on is like disaster prepping. I used to be that guy that like, how do I survive if a nuke hits? You know, of course, if it hits like on Sterling, you're pretty well screwed.
You got to go to the garage.
So, well, you know what? You need to just be quiet and listen because you're screwing things over here, right?
Okay, my bad.
You don't have to turn red. I was just messing with you. What I want to get at on that is it's like if now is the time to be like growing your own food, or when you go to the grocery store and you see like a bag of spinach on sale, buy it. Dehydrate it, make it into a powder. At least you can supplement those nutrients into some of your diet during those times when you may not be able to access it. Get with your local farmers, start buying things like eggs, beef, that kind of stuff. And just to let you know, you can store eggs without a refrigerator for up to 2 years if you put them, I think, in vinegar or something. No, not vinegar, because that pickles them.
They'll keep
something oil. It's
they'll
like
keep
water
on the counter for like 6 months if you don't refrigerate them at all.
Yeah, but there's another way to basically can them, like where you put them in like it's like water or oil or something like that. But anyway, it's time to start like getting together and prepping your stuff and just making sure that you're good to go and that you have what you need to get your family through something like this. Now, I'm not talking like economic collapse, because if it's economic collapse, like it's going to be really bad, right? But the best thing that you can do is you don't let anyone know anything of what you've got. Don't tell them about like your shelter. Don't tell them about your food. Don't tell them about your medical supplies. Don't anything. Because when the shit truly hits the fan, loose lips sink ships, and those people are going to come looking. And there was a guy that I dealt with when I was at work. And to illustrate my point here is he currently exists and lives in our society. Like he is out, he's free, he's not in prison. We have people that are in prison that are crazy that shouldn't be in society. We know that, right? Mm-hmm. But this guy, because he has access to the police are still a thing to hold accountability. Medicine and medical facilities are still a thing because, you know, we're not in an economic collapse. He is able to at least exist in society. But the man is extremely dangerous and extremely mentally unstable. And had it not been for police him knowing police are there to hold him accountable, or medicine there that kind of at least somewhat tried to level him out, and it was a lawless society, he would be a dangerous man. He'd be the one that showed up to your house and strapped you to the metal bed frame with a car battery, torturing you, trying to find out where your guns and your ammo and about your friends and your family and stuff. Because if you haven't had a chance yet, there's a phenomenal read on the Argentinian financial collapse. And that guy was talking about how, like, if you're one of those preppers that thinks you're going to take an AR and walk down the street and you're going to be Billy Badass, think again, because cops are still a thing in an economic collapse, but they're all corrupt. So they're going to take you, arrest you, take your gun, sell your gun for money, food, whatever, unless you bribe them out of arresting you. You know, stuff like that. Like he was talking about, like, concealed carrying a pistol. Yeah, you definitely have to do that. And thinking if you're going to live out in the country and you're going to shoot people from a mile away and blah, 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 blah. Well, people can't hear you scream in the country, and you have to sleep at some point. And there's no way to have 24-hour, 360-degree coverage of your house. So living in the city in an economic collapse is actually better. But there's still no guarantee that when you start screaming for help that anybody's going to come.
Yep.
So, it's one of those things of like loose lips sink ships, start preparing, but don't let anybody know. Don't let anybody know what you got. Don't share it. And if you do have a point where you have to come together as a group, if a person comes to the table and they don't put something in the proverbial pot to eat that day, they don't eat. That's all there is to it. You either provide or you starve. Those are your two choices. Because otherwise, you get yet another like welfare type mentality with people in your circle that don't want to provide. And that's kind of tough for people to stomach because, like, for me, like, I don't have siblings, so it's a little easier for me. But, like, me telling Andrea, like, some of her siblings, like, they would not add to the pot, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, then they don't eat. Well, that's not fair. You're right, it's not. But, like, this is literally the choice between life and death.
It's not fair that I have to go do the work for this. And then
yeah, and you have to change your mindset and remember those things. Like, I bought some things, I have some things, whatever. But, like, remember, those things are dependent completely on, like, those things are completely dependent on electricity, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, I stocked up on all this meat. Let's say that I have that in my freezer. Well, okay, now I need electricity to keep said meat cold. You know, what happens when you start having rolling blackouts?
Yep.
So it's just things like that to think about. This is not me, like, doomsdaying and saying all those other kind of things. But it's just like
why are you trying to scare these poor people, Nick?
I love you all. That's why I'm letting you know this, because I love you all. So it's just things like that to keep in mind, and just keep your mouth shut. I mean, not just in doomsday prepping or whatever it is, but, you know, sometimes just in general. Be bored. Don't sit in front of your phone, in front of your TV. Like, I can't tell you how many times that I've just sat in my patrol car with the radio off and everything, because everything is just noise. Just silence. Go out in nature, get some sun on you, and enjoy that boredom. And then also continue prepping, and, you know, because there may be a day. Every major civilization has crashed over the years. Every single one of them. Mm-hmm. America will be that one someday. And it may be in our lifetime, and it may be 50 lifetimes from now, but it will happen someday. So be prepared for it.
That's right. I don't think it's going to happen this time around. I don't think our government would let it get to that point, because then they'd lose votes.
Well, yeah, and that's not me saying, like, oh my gosh, put on your tinfoil hats or anything. It's just me wanting to pass on just a little bit of the knowledge, because this is something that, like, I've been researching, like, prepping stuff for, like, 20 years maybe, mm-hmm. of just ideas and things that you can do, and that kind of stuff, and thought process, more mindset really than it is items. Which, by the way, you don't want to know the number one most amazing piece of currency that man talked about in the Argentinian collapse that you can buy all day long for probably 49.50 cents right now? Maybe even $1.
Coffee?
Mm-mm. Bic lighters. He said that was the most amazing. Everybody's got to make a fire for one reason or another. Boil water, you know, whatever. Mm-hmm. He said Bic lighters, you can buy those things like by the bag. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. He's like, if you want to prep, that better be part of your prep package.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because you can trade it for food. Everybody's got to make fire. Like, that is a necessity. Like, the fire to cook the food, to boil the water. So food and water. But, like, that was the best thing to have in your prep kit to be able to do that. Because he was saying, like things like medical services, like a can of beans went for $50. One single can of beans. And that was what you could use to, like, pay a doctor for medical services, assuming that doctor even had the items they needed to give you.
Yeah. And it's, you know, like, it's not bad to grow your own food anyways. Like, it's better for you.
Yeah.
You don't have all those preservatives and stuff in it. But another thing is, like, when you start supporting your local economy like that, you don't have the supply chain issues like we're having now, because your chickens aren't coming from New York, or I don't know where our chickens come from.
Yeah, right.
You know,
I get what you're saying, though.
Like, it's not traveling all the way across the country or overseas. You know, it's here. And so that would help with us not having these supply chain issues, or like the big butcher plants shutting down. You know, like, if you got more local butchers that are, or kill houses or whatnot, like butchering meat and selling locally, then you're not going to have these issues of those shutting down and our beef prices skyrocketing.
Well, I think another good skill to have is the art of bartering. We've kind of lost that art of just bartering.
I love that. When I go to those shows, I'm always trading CBD for something else, beard oils or food, or we got some, like, handmade spoons one time, and, like, just trading here and there, wheeling and dealing. I love it.
Yeah, and that's, like, also, like, with you guys, like, that's why I like, you know, trading my labor. Because, like, for instance, I was like, hey, can I get that sprayer? And you were like, yeah, sure. You know, like, I help out, and I got kind of like a bartering thing. Like, I never have come to you and been like, hey, pay me my day's wages, you know, as you're like, hey, here's your 53 cents, enjoy. But that's what you're worth. You didn't do shit. Like that one day I showed up and helped you guys take that table down in the greenhouse, and that was it. And you're like, oh, well, we're done. Like, you gotta be shitting me. But, you know, the art of bartering, and I've even told that with my wife of, like, there are things like she's making jewelries and stuff. I'm like, if you can barter that for something like food or like whatever, like, I don't even care. Like, barter it out. You know, not everything's all about money, because in a financial collapse, you need to be good at bartering and knowing what that's like and how to do it as a skill.
I mean, most of our money is on a freaking plastic card anyways, you know, like it's all electronic.
Yeah, I'd say the vast majority of our money is what you're calling is fiat currency.
I wouldn't have, like, I'd keep maybe $100 cash around, you know. Like,
but even then, that's still fiat currency. It's not backed by anything. It's only worth $100 because you believe it's worth $100. Now, if you have silver certificates, on the other hand, those are backed by actual silver. You can actually supposedly trade those for silver, like $2 worth of silver or something like that. I don't know, but it's actually backed. So if you have silver certificates,
by the
that's
government,
different. Yeah, whatever that's worth. So anyway, that was all I had. We're at 27 minutes, buddy.
That's all I got too.
Cool. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us on the To The Point podcast. We appreciate your support. Continue to just giving us those ratings, reviews. Please, we beg you, just share the podcast quickly on, like, your stories, that kind of stuff. We really are just humbled that you've chosen to spend your time with us here today. Check us out on Instagram at The Higher Points, on Facebook at The Higher Points Podcast. Our website's www.thehigherpoints.com. And we're renting out the podcast studio, so if you want to start a podcast, record a podcast, or get some information on what equipment you need to do, just click on the contact tab on our website and give us an email. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch up with you next time.